and we have only 2 more chapters left in the book of Acts of the Apostles. And today let us finish, let us reflect on the chapter 27 of Acts of the Apostle. And as we all know, St. Paul is being taken to Rome and is going to meet the emperor. He is still in the custody of the Roman soldiers, though he is not found. They have not found any guilt in him, any crime in him. He is still a prisoner, and though he has some liberty because he is not found guilty of any crime, but at the same time, since he appealed to the emperor, he is still one of those prisoners who are taken to the Rome. Let us read from 27 verse 1 onwards. When it was decided that we were to sail for Italy, they transferred Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius. Now we can see there is St. Paul, there are prisoners, and then the centurion, his name is Julius, and there is a group of soldiers, they are called Augustan cohort, and he is one of those members. And these people are there. And along with that, there are the companions of St. Paul. That is why it is written, we were. We is a symbol. We is a sign that St. Luke also joined with them. St. Luke is also one of the companions of St. Paul. And Luke that means it is not St. Paul alone. Festus and the governor Agrippa had given permission for all the companions of St. Paul also to join along with St. Paul in this journey. So St. Paul is not alone in this ship. There are so many other Christians who are also with him. Many other Christians were also there with him, including St. Luke, the author of Acts of the Apostles. Let's continue reading verse 2. We read like this: embarking on a ship of Adramyttium that was about to set sail to the ports along the coast of Asia, we put to sea, accompanied by Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica. So that is the name of the ship, and also Aristarchus is a slave. He is also a companion of St. Paul, who is serving St. Paul. And he's a Macedonian from Thessalonica. Now read verse 3. The next day we put in at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul kindly. Julius is the centurion. He was treating Paul kindly and allowed him to go to his friends to be cared for. That means his friends were also there in the ship. And Julius was treating Paul very kindly, not like a prisoner, because he's still not found guilty on him. Let's read verse 4. The putting out to sea from there, we sailed under the lee of Cyprus because the winds were against us. So this time very rough sea. Therefore they didn't go to the deep sea. They were traveling through the shore and near to the cities and near to the country, near to the land. Let's read verse 5. After we had sailed across the sea that is of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra in Lycia. So these are the places they traveled through the ship. And let's read verse 6. There the centurion found an Alexandrian ship bound for Italy and put us on board. So they changed the ship. They got into an Alexandrian ship which was going to Rome. And they all got into that, including the companions of St. Paul and the prisoners. They all got into that ship. And verse 7. We sailed slowly for a number of days and arrived with difficulty off Cnidus. And as the wind was against us, we sailed under the lee of Crete of Salmon. So they are talking about all their journey. It was a very rough sea all throughout those areas, and therefore they were taking time. Sailing past it with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens near the city of Lasea. So they came to this place. And verse 9, since much time had been lost and sailings was now dangerous because even the fast had already gone by, Paul advised them. So there was a day of fast. That day of fast is called the Day of Atonement. And after this Day of Atonement was over, they started planning to journey because the day of atonement was over. That means there were so many Jewish people also were in the ship because they had to celebrate the day of atonement, and they did the fasting. On the day of fasting, no one is supposed to do work, and therefore they didn't start the journey. Now fasting days are over, therefore they thought of starting their journey. And then Paul said, "Sirs, I can see that the voyage will be with danger, and much heavy loss will be there, not only of the cargo and the ship, but also of our lives." So St. Paul foresee the things. St. Paul knew this is going to be dangerous. Not because he got the gift of vision and word of knowledge. Of course, that word of knowledge also worked here, but at the same time, he is an experienced traveler. He already had a shipwreck. By this time, he had already had 3 shipwrecks. And therefore, he knew the climate, weather, everything. And therefore, he could foresee the danger in front of him. Therefore, he's warning his leaders and the people who are captains of the ship, saying, "Don't travel now. It is going to be a life-threatening journey." But since he's not an expert, according to them, he's not an expert of the oceanography or anything, therefore they didn't listen to him. But instead, the centurion paid more attention to the pilot, the captain, and to the owner of the ship than to what Paul said, because Paul doesn't seem to be an expert for all these. Therefore, they didn't listen to Paul, but instead they listened to the pilot and also to the owner of the ship. Since the harbor was not suitable for spending the winter, the majority was in favor of putting to sea for them there, on the chance that somehow they could reach Phoenix, where they could spend the winter. It was a harbor of Crete, facing southwest and northwest. So everybody wanted to move out of this place because of the winter. So they didn't listen to St. Paul. And verse 13, we read like this: "When a moderate south wind began to blow," when the very heavy wind stopped and small moderate wind started, they thought they could achieve their purpose. So they weighed anchor and began to sail past Crete and close to the shore. And verse 14. But soon a violent wind called the northeaster rushed down from Crete. So a violent wind started. Verse 15. And since the ship was caught and could not be turned head on into the wind, we gave way to it and were driven. So they tried to go against the oars, against the wind, but it was not successful because the wind was so strong. So they allowed the ship to be carried by the wind. Sometimes it can happen when we cannot stand against the wind, and then they have only one option: allow the wind to carry the ship where the wind want to take, and the wind will take the ship. So that is the only option. So by running under the lee of a small island called Cauda, we were scarcely able to get the ship's boat under control. So each ship has got small lifeboats. So, and they were able to control and keep the lifeboats also ready and safe. Verse 17. After hoisting it up, they took measures to undergird the ship. Then, fearing that they would run on the Syrtis, they lowered the sea anchor and so were driven. And verse 18. And we were being pounded by the storm so violently that on the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. When very heavy winds happens, the ship used to be shaking like anything, and that is the time they want to reduce the weight of the ship, and therefore they threw all the cargo outside. And verse 19. And on the third day, with their own hands, they threw the ship's tackle overboard. And verse 20. And when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, no small tempest raged, all hope of our being saved was at last abandoned. So now they came to know they all are going to die. No sun, no stars, because continuous heavy windstorm and lightning and cloud and heavy rain, and they knew there is no possibility of saving themselves. Verse 21. Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul then stood up among them and said, Men, you should have listened to me and not have set sail from Crete, and thereby avoided this damage and loss. Now St. Paul is speaking out. First thing, they didn't have food for a long time. Not because they didn't have any food, but because they were not able to have food because of seasickness, because continuous shaking of the ship that made them vomiting and all these things. So they stopped eating food, and that is one reason they didn't have long time food, because later we see they having food. So it's not because they didn't have food, but they had no choice but to keep fasting. And then Paul stood in front of them and said, "Men, you should have listened to me. I had told you before starting the journey that there will be damage. But anyway, don't worry." Verse 22. First he said, he corrected them, and then he said, "I urge you now to keep up your courage. Don't worry. Take courage. For there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship." So he's giving a good news and bad news. The good news is nobody will die. Bad news is ship will be destroyed. So they knew there will be a shipwreck. So St. Paul is predicting a shipwreck, but nobody will lose the life. So that was the prediction, the word of knowledge St. Paul proclaimed. And everybody kept quiet. And for last night, and he explained how did he get this message. For last night there stood by me an angel of the Lord, to whom I belong, whom I worship. So he said, I am worshipping a God, and that God has sent me an angel, and he stood by me. My dear brothers and sisters, this is also a message. Anybody who believes in Jesus, there is an angel to stand by you. When you believe in Jesus and worship Jesus Christ, then God will appoint an angel to stand by you, even in the moments of crisis. Just because you are a child of God and you are a believer of God doesn't mean there won't be any storm in your journey. The storms will be there. Tempest will be there. Earthquake will be there. All the natural calamities and supernatural calamities will be there. But the angel of God will be standing by you to protect you, because that is what God gives you. So just because you believe in God doesn't mean your life will be smooth. Your life need not be smooth. There will be problems. There will be tempest. There will be family problem. There will be relationship problem. There will be sicknesses. But an angel of God will be standing by you to strengthen you each moment when you fail. Let's read verse 24. And he said, "Do not be afraid." The angel told me, St. Paul was explaining, angel came at night and he said, "Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before the emperor." So what does angel says? Don't worry. Even if you are facing a big life-threatening experience in the middle of the sea, don't be scared. You will stand in front of the emperor. So what does it mean? God is giving one more assurance. Paul is already assured that he will be safe, because God has already told him before the journey starts, you will stand in front of the emperor. You will have to testify in front of the emperor. That means he knew he will survive. So he must have prayed for others to survive. So St. Paul was praying in front of God, God, please protect others. Everyone should be protected. None of them should be lost. So he prayed. That is why angel came and said, you will stand in front of the emperor. One more assurance. And he said, God has granted safety to all those who are sailing with you. So all those who are sailing with you, God is granting safety, because you asked for it. You asked for it, and that is why it's granted, because they are sailing with you. My dear brothers and sisters, if one person is holy in your community, there will be protection granted to others. If one person is holy, the others also will be protected. You know, God said to Abraham, he is going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham asked, if there is at least 10 people, will you destroy? Then God said, no. If there is at least 10 people in that city, I will protect that city. But there was unfortunately not even 10 people were there. My dear brothers and sisters, in your life, the same way, if there is at least one person who is holy and connected to God, God will give the safety and protection for the entire family. Verse 25, we read like this. So keep up your courage, men. So again, St. Paul says, don't worry, keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as I have been told. I believe in this God whom I have faith in, and it will be exactly as I have told you. Verse 26. But we will have to run aground on some island. There will be a shipwreck and we will reach an island. So I don't know exactly which island, though God knows. God did not reveal that island's name to Paul, but he said we will reach an island, there will be shipwreck. And verse 27. When the 14th night had come, as we were drifting across the Sea of Adria, about midnight, the sailors suspected that they were nearing a land. So they knew, the sailors understood it's going to a land. Verse 28. We read like this. So they took soundings and found 20 fathoms. The length, the height of the water and also the ship was 20 fathoms. From the bottom of the sea and to the ship, there was 20 fathoms distance. A little farther on, they took soundings again and found 15 fathoms. And then verse 20, that means the distance is reducing. That means they are reaching to the land. And verse 29, fearing that we might run on the rocks, they let down 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for day to come. So they let down all the anchors because otherwise the ship will go into the land and there will be a terrible shipwreck and they may not be able to reach out to the land. Therefore, they waited for the next day to come so that in the daytime it is easy for them to swim and reach the land. And they waited. Verse 30. But when the sailors who are the captains who are in charge of the ship, who knows the ship, how to control the ship. But when the sailors tried to escape from the ship and had lowered the boat into the sea on the pretext of putting out anchors from the bow. You know, the sailors, they knew there is going to have a shipwreck. If there is a shipwreck, there is no possibility of escaping because there are more than 276 people. And only limited lifeboats, only a couple of lifeboats. So it is not possible for them to escape. So they decided, the whole crowd is waiting for the day to start. The sunrise. They are all waiting for the sunrise. So the ship is moving slowly. So they thought, instead of pretending in the pretext of putting out anchors, they can lower the lifeboat and escape from with the lifeboat. They thought like this because they knew there will be a shipwreck and everyone will be dying. And at least they can escape. So they wanted to escape. But St. Paul knew this. Let's read verse 31. Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers and said, unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved. These people should not escape because they know they are expert of controlling the ship. If they escape, how are we going to control the ship? Therefore, unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved. Then centurion started obeying St. Paul. Until then, he was only obeying the pilot and the owner, but now he started obeying St. Paul because they came to know whatever St. Paul said, it is happened, is coming to pass. Verse 32. Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the boat and set it adrift. So they removed the boat. And then verse we read, and just before daybreak, Paul urged all of them to take some food. He told everyone to take the food. Today is the 14th day that you have been in suspense and remaining without food, having eaten nothing. Because they were continuously vomiting and the ship was moving and shaking, so they could not eat anything, so they were fasting. And now St. Paul is encouraging everyone to have food because he knew that everybody has to swim through the water, so they had to take something to eat. And then he encouraged everyone to eat, and they started eating. Therefore, I urge you to take some food, for it will help you survive, for none of you will lose a hair for your heads. So St. Paul said, none of you will lose a hair from your head. Nothing will happen to you. Verse 35. And after he had said these, he took bread and giving thanks to God in the presence of all, he broke it and began to eat. My dear brothers and sisters, now he is celebrating the Holy Mass. He celebrated the breaking of the bread. He gave the food for everyone, and when everyone was eating, he celebrated the Holy Mass for himself and his companions. That the church teachers, especially the scholars, say he celebrated the breaking of the bread among the Christians and among themselves, and the food is already given to everyone, but he celebrated the Holy Mass and then ate along with his companions. So that is what is written. After he had said this, he took bread and giving thanks to God in the presence of all, he broke it and began to eat. And then when he celebrated the Holy Mass, and when they ate the Holy Eucharist, what happened to everyone? There was a tremendous change in everyone. All of them were encouraged and took food for themselves. They all took their food. They all got encouraged. This is the effect of the Holy Eucharist. Verse 37. And we were in all 276 persons in the ship. 276 persons in the ship. We were all, including St. Luke and St. Paul. And verse 38. After they had satisfied their hunger, they lightened the ship by throwing the wheat into the sea. So the rest of the food is also thrown into the sea. And verse 39. In the morning they did not recognize the land, but they noticed a bay with a beach on which they planned to run the ship ashore if they could. So they could not recognize the land, but they knew there is a bay, there is a beach. And then verse 40, we read like this. So they cast off the anchors and left them in the sea. At the same time, they loosened the ropes that tied the steering oars. Then hoisting the foresail to the wind, they made for the beach. And verse 41. But striking a reef, they ran the ship aground. The bow stuck and remained immovable, but the stern was being broken up by the force of the waves. There was a terrible waves, and then the ship wrecked. Verse 42. And the soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners so that none might swim away and escape. So even at this time, when everyone is going to lose their life, soldiers wanted to kill the prisoners. Why did they want to kill the prisoners at this moment? Because according to Roman law, if any prisoner escape from the Roman soldiers' hands, these Roman soldiers will be killed. So Roman soldiers knew if the prisoners escape, even if they escape, they will be killed later by the Roman soldiers. It is better to kill these prisoners and try to escape, at least they will be saved. So they were wondering, these prisoners, the soldiers knew either or they will be killed. If the prisoners escape, if they didn't die in this shipwreck, they will be killed by the Roman soldiers later. So anyway, death is for sure. So better kill these prisoners and try to escape. At least there is hope. So that is why they wanted to kill these prisoners, so that none might swim away and escape. Verse 43. But the centurion, he loved the Paul. He had a soft corner towards Paul. Centurion kept them from carrying on their plans, and he ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and make for the land. So he told the soldiers first, go to the land first, so that once the prisoners come, you can catch them. So he made them and he made sure that the soldiers do not kill any prisoner, because he wanted to save Paul. Praise the Lord. So this is all what happened in the chapter 27. And my dear brothers and sisters, what is that we learn from this chapter? This chapter is very interesting because it's a beautiful story, first of all. Secondly, Paul is an anointed one of God, the apostle of God. And he is being taken to the Rome, where God has promised that he will reach. But in spite of Paul was there in the journey, St. Luke was there in the journey, and also many Christians were there in that ship, but still the ship wrecked. Shipwreck, and there was a big problem, and they were all facing death. That journey was not smooth. So always remember, just because you are a child of God and you are a holy one, and you are praying every day, you are going for Sunday Mass, daily Mass, you are praying daily holy prayer, family prayer, doesn't mean your whole life will be smooth. Doesn't mean you will have no sickness and no problems. The problems will come. Sickness also may come. Dangers also may face. You may face dangers and struggles, but God will protect you. God's blessing and God's presence will accompany you. You may have to go through difficult moments of your life, but still your God will accompany you, follow you, walk with you. And that is what we learn from this passage.